Well now, good day to you friends. Seamus here. Thank you for joining me for today's story. And it is a lovely story about a fine man, a good dog, and how they became friends. And speaking of friends, give me just a moment to say thank you to two very, very sweet people. I want to say hello to my friends Jillian and Joanne. They've been supporters of my work here from the very beginning, and I appreciate their friendship, and I look forward to seeing them again soon. Speaking of how you can help and how you can be a part, of course, friends, I always ask that if you enjoy the video, give it a like here, give it a like on YouTube and Facebook, share it maybe with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you want, and if you're feeling really frisky down in the comments, there's a way that you can send me a wee tip through the Buy Me a Coffee app. But enough of all that right now. Let's just get on with today's story, which is called simply The Hungry Hound. Once upon a time, many generations ago, there was a kind man that lived with his family in a small cottage just about a mile or so's walk down a forest path outside of the closest town. And it was in that town that he made his living, because it was there that he kept a butcher shop. And he made good work of it and took good care of his family. And he was always kind enough to be aware of the village that he lived in, and if there was a family that was struggling, he always made sure they had a little something for their soup pot. He never forgot the people that had helped him. Well, on one particular day, it was near the end of the day, and his work was done, and he had scrubbed his cutting boards and sharpened his knives, and he was just about to hang up his apron and head his way home, when from behind him across his shop yard, he heard a little noise. And turning around, through the fence, down in the tall grass, about 4 or 5 feet away from the fence, he could just make out a small dog. And I say a small dog, it wasn't really a small dog, it wasn't a big dog, it wasn't a hairy dog, it wasn't a sleek dog, but the one thing that the man noticed was that he could see the outline of the doggy's ribs through the fur of his chest. And he was moved with compassion for the wee dog, and he reached down into the bucket of bits that he was taking home to his own family, and found a gnarly bit of bone and threw it up and over the fence and into the tall grass for the dog to enjoy for his dinner. And with that, the man wiped off his hands, hung up his apron, noticed that the dog didn't move, so he just picked up his bucket, crossed the yard to the gate, and made his way down the forest path to hie his way home. Now, the doggy laying in the tall grass, he kept a good eye on the man until he was far enough gone that he couldn't see or hear him. And it was only then that he crept through the grass, and he picked up that gnarly bone in his teeth and made his way off through the forest. Now, of course, along the way, the doggy stopped and sniffed and scratched and dug wherever he thought he needed to, but he was looking for a little branch in that path, because taking the path off to the left, there was a little bridge that went over a stream, and on the far side of that stream is where the dog had his den, his safe place to sleep. And off he went. Well, he made his way through the forest, and in time he came to the path, and looking both ways to make sure no one was there to bother him or scare him, he took that little fork off to the left, and sure enough, there was the little bridge over the little stream. And he went up onto the bridge, and this day for the doggy, the strangest thing happened. For the first time in a very, very long time, he looked down from the bridge as he was crossing it. And of course, in the water below, what did he see but his own reflection? But our poor doggy friend had never seen a mirror. He had no idea what a reflection was. And all he saw was that down there on the stream, there was another dog. Well, of course it was him, but he didn't know that. There was another dog, and the dog had a bone in its teeth. And this dog looked a little bit bigger than our friend on the bridge. And he thought maybe that dog was there to take his bone away. So he gave that other dog a little snarl. Arrgh. And sure enough, that other dog down in the stream, he gave a little snarl back. Arrgh. Well, our dog was aghast, and he looked down again, and that dog was still there, so he gave a little growl. Arrgh. And that other dog came back with another growl of his own. Arrgh. Well, this incensed our little doggy friend to no end, and he was going to protect his bone no matter what, so he gave a mighty bark and dove off the bridge right into the water, only to land in the water and realizing that what he saw was nothing but himself in the shining surface of the water, and in barking at this strange dog that wasn't there, he lost his bone. And now he was empty-handed and empty-bellied. And to add insult to injury, when he paddled his way to shore, he came up on the same side of the stream that he had just left and still had to make his way home. Well, he came up to he scrambled up the stream bed, and he made his way up onto the tall grass along the shore, and he laid down with a sigh and a deep, deep sadness, and looking up, not that far away where the fork in the pathway was, who should he see standing there but the man from the butcher shop that had thrown him in the bone in the first place. And what the doggy didn't know is that that man had been standing there the whole long time. See, he had come to the fork in the road just a few seconds after the doggy had turned towards the bridge, and He paused and watched to see where this dog might go, hoping that he could perhaps help him. And he watched as the dog walked up onto the bridge, and he watched as the dog looked down at the water, and he heard the dog snarl, and he heard the dog growl, and he was saddened when he heard the dog bark and saw him drop his bone and dive into the stream. And startled into stillness, the man stood there and waited and watched as the dog scrambled up out of the stream and lay down sad in the tall grass. Now the dog looked at the man, and the man looked at the dog, and he was quite sad for the poor little pupper. And he reached down into that same bucket, and he grabbed another scraggly bit meant for his own family. And he threw it across into the tall grass by the stream so the doggy would have a meal that night. And he made his way off home. And in moments the dog picked up the meat, ran across the bridge, and found his little den in the woods where he would spend his night. And the man went home to his family. Well, a few days later, the man wasn't very surprised when near the end of the day, as he was washing his cutting boards and sharpening his knives, there was a noise behind him, and sure enough, not very far away, right at the fence, was that dog sitting ever so quietly with his head stuck between the split rails, watching everything the man did. And the man, of course, reached down into the bucket and flicked a piece of meat to the dog, and off he went home. And a few days later, there was a noise again, and this time when the man turned around, the dog was inside the fence, about halfway between the man and the fence. And he flicked him a little bit of scruffy bone, and of course the dog came up and took it and dished off into the woods, and the man went home. And just about a week after they first met, the man was cleaning up, wondering if he'd see his furry friend again, and he had scrubbed his cutting boards and sharpened his knife and was just about to hang up his apron when he heard a sound again, and sure enough, there was the dog, not more than maybe 10 feet away. This time the man reached into his bucket, came up with a wee choice morsel, and instead of throwing it, he just held out his hand, beckoning the dog to him. And it took a moment, but the dog took a step, and then another step. And in just a minute or two, the dog had come right up to the man, taking the bit of meat directly from his fingers. The man washed his hands, hung up his apron, headed for the gate, not surprised at all that wee doggy was following him out of the shop yard and onto the pathway home. Well, that dog followed the man all the way to the fork in the trail, and rather than going to the left and over the stream, when the man turned right, the dog turned right. And that dog followed the man all the way to his cottage, and the man called out so his family would know there was a dog coming. And his wife and his children met the dog, and he was very well received, but he was still a little skitterish, a little scared. And when the man and his family went in for their dinner, the dog went into the deep shadows by the woodpile, where he laid himself down and waited. He knew that he had something in his belly, and this man had been kind, so he took a chance that he would be safe, and he settled down to sleep. But just as the sun was setting and the evening was creeping in, he heard the door of the cottage open, and who should come out but not the man, but the man's kindly wife. And in her hand she had the small pot that she had warmed their soup in. And she brought the pot over to the dog and let him lick the pot clean. And when she went into the house, she left the door open. The family wasn't surprised when just a little while later they heard the little sound of nails on the earthen-packed floor of the cottage, and they looked as the dog ever so quietly came in, made his way around the edge of the room, and laid himself down in a soft spot by the fireplace. And that night, for the first time in his life, that little doggy went to bed with a full belly and a warm, cozy place to sleep, with one of the children sitting beside him, petting the ruff on his head as he slipped off to rest. From that day on, the dog had a family, and the family had a new best friend. And every day when the man went to work, that dog would trot down the path with him, and every night on the way home, that dog would trot home behind him, knowing that he was going to get pets from the children and a little treat of some kind from the good wife. And that doggy, that good man, his kind wife, and their sweet children all lived happily ever after. I do thank you for your kindness in watching today, friends. Again, if you could, give it a like here or wherever you found it. Subscribe if you want. Share it if you want. Send me a coffee if you want. The link's down below. I just appreciate you listening. It's been a long time, and I'll work on getting better at that. In the meantime, until we see each other again, take good care of yourselves and the people around you, and I will see you soon. Cheers.